Welcome to Masters of Self University podcast, your highest source of sacred truths and universal wisdom. Hello, beautiful souls. I'm Rachel Fiori, mystic, spiritual teacher, psychic healer, and founder of Masters of Self University. Join our journey of soul transformation as we deep dive into this latest episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Masters of Self University podcast. I'm your host, Ellie Lee.
And I'm your host, Danny Morley. And today, Ellie and I are joined by one of our incredible mystical coaches of oneness, Gregoire Bosque. Welcome, Gregoire.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Absolutely. And the topic of what we're going to talk about today, this idea to kind of speak on this subject, this came up first for you in class, correct?
Yeah, actually came in class, and it was a beautiful realization that I was convinced that everybody was seeing things like that. And actually in that class, I realized, oh, actually, this is my personal way of seeing it, maybe something like that. And so you suggested that we do a podcast about it, and I definitely want to speak about it.
Yeah, beautiful. And the topic, Greg, you said is all wounds stem from the severance of our divinity. So what happened in class?
So it was about, I don't remember, but some other coaches were asking questions. And at some point, I wanted to express that notion of actually all of our wounding is like at the root of it is that severance of the connection to the divine. So that as we are coming into this world as kids, we are fully authentic, fully in the present moment. And this connection is like our birthright. And so then we start being conditioned to actually get more mental and to end up like really locked up in our minds. And every time those events come like big shocks and are inviting us to compromise that connection to the divine, this is where wounds are created. Because we then have to compromise for any kind of reasons, most of the times for safety reasons, the internal dichotomy of what's happening is like, oh, I have to compromise my relationship to that purity, innocence, authenticity for what I'm being asked in that situation or in those circumstances.
Right. And if we lived in a world where obviously it was safe, we had enlightened parents, we wouldn't have so much wounding. And I know that sounds obviously very obvious, but the more and more you unpack the layers of your own wounding and the programs of separation and severance that we run, I've realized, oh man, like this world could be way different if we just had people who were bringing up children on the planet that were truly conscious, not just saying the word, oh, conscious parenting, to actually be a truly conscious individual, meaning they're fully aware of the programs that they run, they're fully aware of maybe what's happening in another being, and the ramifications of dimming down our light and not becoming the authentic self that we truly are. How quickly that imprints into a little child who's forming in this world. And something that I'm always questioning is like we get born into this world and then we develop these programs as like, which part of me is the true authentic self? And then which part of me is this false self that I've created for some reason? And as you mentioned, sometimes it's safety. There's a whole host of reasons, but we have to learn to dim down our light for some reason, and why. And then how do I actually figure out, well, which part of me is the real me? This is something I'm constantly questioning.
Yeah, and as you're saying that, Greg, too, and Danny, you're just speaking about this, we've been taught to learn how to sever our connection to our divinity. And, I mean, most of us lived in survival growing up. So when you're in survival and you have no guidance, I mean, the only thing to do is learn how to create all of these programs and things like that, which ultimately obviously sever us from our divinity. But it was, I mean, what else can you do in a patriarchal hellhole when you're brought up in an unenlightened society? I mean, this is the result of what you do when you are raised in that kind of world, is that in order for us to survive, in order for us to get through, we must sever. I mean, that's the only thing we know. We don't even know that we're divine. We don't even know what we really are. Which is like, it's heartbreaking to really think about it and look at it.
Yes, and think about it. But patriarchy is really, direct conflict to the goddess, the creation goddess. This is a direct threat to the creative goddess. And so the way it will express within us, like, think about it. It's like to come down and incarnate into a body and awaken to the reality of where you actually are incarnating, which is all patriarchal, colonial, and that also as a kid, you have a clear sight of everyone being stuck in their head, not being able to connect fully, deeply, for real, not being able to really be present and to see actually what you're going through. And actually, they all are educating you in the same time. How frightening. I mean, and we all been there many times, obviously, like going back into those places and realizing how actually as a child, how sensitive and how clearly we can read energies and scan what's really happening. That's really frightening. And that's the nature of this world we're growing in. Like, we're growing in that cultural entity that spread out on the whole planet, that eradicate, like, rape, impose, control, dominate all other form of ways of coexisting and co-creating in that realm.
Something too is, for those of you, I don't know, Greg, if you were, I know Danny really wasn't, but growing up religious as well. I mean, that's a whole other layer too that severs us even deeper from our divinity, because now what I'm being taught as a child is, when I'm afraid, when I feel anything that's painful or whatever it is, we'll just pray to Jesus, or just read the Bible, right? Which is furthering me from my divinity, because now it's conditioning me and programming me to believe that I need a savior to get me through what I'm experiencing. I mean, and that's why, obviously religion is the biggest cult that rules this world, but that other layer, that indoctrination too, I mean, drifts us even farther and farther away from our souls, from our divine power, from our divinity. And I know that that's something that a lot of people, that's a whole other layer of healing that I'm having to do, because of how much I've been brainwashed with religion and this constant, like, every time I'd feel anything, my mom was like, well, why don't you just go pray or go read this Bible, and she would say this Bible verse to me over and over and over again, as if that's going to make me feel better. And what it actually always did was just, I need Jesus to be okay. I need Jesus to survive. I need Jesus to make it through, which is, we're seeing that a lot right now, of people flocking back to religion and flocking back to Christ, because, the Mother Earth is ascending and a lot of stuff is coming up. And so that's a whole other layer too that severs us from our divinity.
Yeah, and you have the other side of the pendulum too. atheism and scientism, and people that will believe anything that can be weighted and measured. And so you have a lot of actually ways to get pushed and conditioned and programmed into severing and actually harming, because this is all abusive and harm and against the very creative nature of life itself. So yeah, Daniel.
Yeah, it's really, really beautifully said. And it just as you're talking, Greg, it's just taking me on like these journeys of just seeing deep into how we go, we get brought up in this world, we get born into this world, should I say, and then we are divinity, right? I've seen that in like little babies' eyes, and it's really easy to see in puppies as well. Like, oh my God, they come into this world and they're just the most adorable thing ever. And then this world, isn't anything but perfect. So there's imprints on there that start to happen. And then as you were talking, like it almost seems like there's just like pathways and corridors that we end up going down, like the wrong path, away from the true creative power, away from our true authentic self, away from who we actually came here to be. Because there's this little fragment that starts to happen with each one of these moments in our childhood when things aren't like perfect. And then because we don't have the enlightened parents, or if we're speaking about dogs now, like incredible, really awakened, powerful leaders and dog parents, if we're speaking about puppies, it just allows that more fragments to happen, or those corridors, those pathways that we go down, just to be further entrenched, and you can get further lost and lost and lost, until eventually you end up living out your life down all of these false corridors in an attempt just to be okay. And then we start this work and we start healing, and there's an irony here of where we're going back to try and get back to the pure innocent part of us, the beauty of like our natural creative expression. But then at the same time, we're trying to actually elevate and mature that part of us up and out of whatever it experienced. This like almost like a little paradox going on, where we're trying to go back to where we came from, but then elevating and maturing out of what it was that created the trauma in the first place.
Yeah, and all those parts that actually are wounded, they're just waiting for one thing, is to be, because all the wounds are literally dissociation, compartmentalization of some aspects of us. And so all those parts, they're always begging and screaming to be reunified in our divinity. So, and this is the process that we teach at Masters of Self, is how to do that, actually, how to actually just know how to take everything that you're suffering from, all your deepest wound, and be able to bring them back home and reunify those aspects that are wounded, meaning that are disconnected from the divine, and how to get them back into the divine itself. And this is the alchemical process that we teach, and it's clearly, the more I go and I dive into it, and the more I see how the design of life itself is meant for that you can choose to go so far out into disconnection. It's just a choice. You can go so far out into disconnection, but everything is meant and designed for you to get back to this original, divine creative power that you are of co-creating. And so, yeah, you can choose actually to unconsciously co-create from your wounding. And this is what we see out there, you know, all the harm and the hurt that is created more and more.
Yeah, you can also choose it consciously as well. I mean, I think most of it is unconscious, but there's been moments where within the last 6 months, I know, oh, I'm not supposed to eat this thing. And I know the most divine thing to do is like not and maybe fast right now. And yet I'm like, fuck it. I'm gonna do it. And there's a part of me that knows like when I do this thing, I'm going against my nature. I'm going against divinity. I'm not creating harmony. Yet there's still this, you know, a part of me that wants to, and obviously the part of me that wants to is that wounded part, right? That is the part that's fractured off, and obviously, and this is where that teaching comes in about how like love is always a choice, right? You can never force somebody to love someone, right? It's something that we have to actually choose. And that's our nature, is like that ability to choose. If we had no ability to choose, it wouldn't be divinity. Because we have the ability to choose and still go down the wrong path, that's what makes it divine. And when we take away that choice, that's not what divinity is. Then that's the, you know, the energies that have been on this planet for the last however many thousands of years, that we see through the patriarchy, is this dominate, conquer, control, take away people's choice, take away people's power, and all this energy of force, which we're all, I'm sure, very, very familiar with, which does not lead to any sense of lasting joy, enlightenment, peace, fulfillment. When you're living in the energy of force, it's anything but divine.
Yeah, and I think there's something so fascinating about what the patriarchy has done to all of us. And then when you see that there's been an invitation to a soul to really do the work on themselves, right? To unshackle themselves from the patriarchy, they don't want to, right? And so we see these programs of resistance or avoidance, or even the addiction to suffering. You know, I've seen people who are they don't know how addicted they are to the suffering. They don't actually want to let go of the suffering because they're comfortable in it now. It's their identity. It's like when you watch a TV show. I remember watching this TV show and they found this woman who had been, you know, a prisoner of this man for like 26 years. And they were like, "You're free." And she's like, "No, I don't want to go. Like, this is what I've grown accustomed to. I don't actually want to leave because I don't know what's out there. I'm not familiar with it." And that is completely the manipulation and the brainwashing of what patriarchy has done to so many of us, that they don't actually want to detach from it. I mean, I've worked with like a lot of students and clients where you can see what they're running so many programs, and they know they're running programs, and they're so they know that they're severed in that moment because you're choosing the wounding, you're choosing the programs. And then it's a conscious choice. You can choose to be there, or you can wake up right now and connect to your divinity. And then the moment they do, they're like, "Oh," it's like, "Yeah, why did we just spend 25 minutes of you staying in the programs and the wounding?" And that's just a reflection of how deep this conditioning has gone for us.
Yeah, and speaking about choice, actually, we know how there's different levels of choice. And that because what is severed is the ability to connect to life itself, expressing itself throughout us, throughout our own emotions, throughout our own, you know, like even throughout our own humanity, throughout nature, throughout everything that is created down there. The ability to purely, profoundly, deeply connect. So then, where are we taking those choices from? When we are not able to connect deeply, when we are stuck at the surface level of the intellect of things, that we have no awareness whatsoever of what's happening on all the depth of the 90% of reality that's energetic, that is happening beneath the surface of the intellect, we just persuading ourselves that we are choosing, because our real free will has been totally twisted and taken over, by our programming, by our conditioning. And this is why we call this awakening. It's like suddenly realizing how actually your own free will has been completely twisted and distorted at some levels you're not able to connect yet. So the whole idea of free will is really tricky. It's all could be a whole podcast on itself.
Yeah, it's like we think we have free will, and we do have free will, but then at the same time we don't have free will because we've been so wounded and conditioned to not know that we actually have a choice. I had this conversation with my father a few years ago where I told him, like, he was sharing with me some pain, and I was like, well, you could heal from that. That's actually what I help people through. And he was like, oh, no. And I could tell, like, he was choosing to say no, but it wasn't him that was actually choosing that, right? It was all of his programs and his wounds. And so to actually say that he had a choice in that moment is a little, he definitely did. I presented it with him. I could say you could do the work to heal all that grief and heartbreak that's in there. And he didn't want to. So he did choose that, but it's like, it's all of his programs. And this is the case for, all of us. It's our programs and our wounding that's often making those choices. So do we actually have free will? And that's a great question. And as you said, Gregoire, we could do a whole podcast just on that alone.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of when my mom used to say this thing to me a lot, where she'd be like, I'm just really small like my dad. I'm just like I'm just small inside. And I would wait for the rest of the sentence and nothing would ever come. And this is what I am. This is what I'm going to keep choosing to be. And there's no other option. I don't actually want to hear if there's another option, which was always interesting for me to hear as a little girl. And then I would start thinking, well, if she's choosing to stay small, then is that what I am? And this is where stuff gets passed down. But that's interesting, Danny, that you brought that, because it brought up, like, yeah, that's what my mom would always say to me, as if there is no other choice. This is it. This is the dead end. There's nothing else. And it's like, yeah, how sad that the programs and the wounding have now completely solidified her into, I am small and that's just what I am.
Yeah, and just to stay with my example, I don't know if this was the same for you, Al. Like, it wasn't like he received the offer of, like, well, you do have a choice. You could do this or you could do that. It wasn't like he was like, oh man, let me feel into that and really think about what it is that I actually want. What do I actually want? It was an immediate, no, I'm not going to do that. And that immediate response, that to me showed me it's not actually him that's here, like the true him, making that decision. It's like, when it comes that quick, it's probably, not saying that's black and white by any means, but I could just tell it wasn't like he sat with that and really felt into it. It was just an immediate response of, like, nope, can't do that.
No, it's a reaction. And no reaction is a conscious choice. You're just the puppet to your own reactions. And this is what, when we speak about, enslavement and prison planet, like, look around. Everybody is stuck and locked up in their minds, in reactivity to everything. So now we can bomb, we can harm, we can create, like, horrific things because of the compulsion and the reactivity of what is arising within me that I'm not able to connect to. It's pretty basic the way it's happening. And this is so all around, like, everything is the expression in many different ways of that whole dynamic, inviting us actually to do something else.
Yeah, and Gregoire, I'd love to go back to, at the beginning, you were talking about, like, the divine creator herself. And obviously, everyone on this call, we follow Rachel and we learn from her teachings and we're becoming the work ourselves. But you know, it's just really awesome to hear another man talking about like the divine creator herself, like talking about all that. So I'd love for you just to touch on like your experiences with that and everything around around that.
So there is many ways we can speak of that, and some can be more religious than others, but one way to express it is life, organic life force, creative energy that we can see in nature everywhere. We look at nature and we see, wow, this is perfection at its best. There is a plane going. And we are so able to see that in some ways, how everything interconnects as its precise, specific role. And all of this is expressing itself throughout us every millisecond of the day. The same organic intelligence, the same grace, the divine grace of the creative life force is blasting all of our being all the time. And so all our wounding, a lot of things that people will name as their problems or their struggles, this is actually this life force pouring, pushing everything that needs to be healed, anything that you need to awaken to, that you need to solve and pay attention and give care to. This is what I call the goddess. This is this creative life force. In India, they call it Shakti. This is Shakti, you know, moving you. Let it move you. Let life move you instead of letting your mind dictate and oppress life. Because this is, in the end, what we are doing and what we are conditioned to do, is to oppress the divine life force, organic nature pouring to us. And we are trying to impose like the square little limited intellectual mind to that marvelous, you know, thing that is actually responsible for us being all here, and that we are all an extension, a fractal extension of.
Again, how can we be that when this whole society is about work, grind, hustle, survival, 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 survival? You know, it's just this constant, like, you got to work, so you got to make money, we're in a constant survival state. And when you're in a constant survival state, we're not in just beingness, right? So if we were just being, right, all the life force energy that you speak about, I mean, that would just flow. But all I see around me is everyone's always stressed out. Everybody's constantly anxious. You know, it's it comes down to, am I going to be able to provide for myself? Am I going to become anything? I mean, we're in this hamster wheel of, it's got to be this, you got to do this, you got to do that. And, you know, I talk about this a lot on the podcast too. I've brought a lot of that energy even to this journey that I'm on. Like, am I doing enough? Am I working hard enough? Am I dropping in enough? You know, am I going in enough? And it's like, whoa, none of that feels like beautiful flowing life force energy. It just feels like the patriarchy, just like, you know, crushing you and crushing you and crushing you until you're so down on the ground that the only thing you can do is be there and stay there. Because, I mean, that's what you know.
Yeah, this is actually patriarchy at play, resisting and imposing, violating the goddess, life force and energy. And this is why, as kids, we're carrying so many wounds, because our own parents, this is all they can teach, because this is what they're doing. How to resist the flow of life, the organic flow of divinity itself. And so, and this is deeply, deeply, deeply rooted in years and centuries and millennium of that stream of consciousness and all these, branches and like development has been like seeding. And so, yeah, we can see it like it's all resisting, forcing, trying to force the organic flow of life into something that is apart from that, apart from life.
And in your own experience, Gregoire, have you ever understood how this energy, this patriarchal, conquering, distortion, parasitic, resistant, forceful energy, like I've heard that it like basically came to the planet and corrupted it. But I'm always wondering, like, how did it get created? Like, how did that begin? And then, because it's obviously it's not our divinity, right? And so where along the line did creation create something that's truly not divine?
So I can only suppose, but my way of the way I can see that is that free will. If you want to have free will, you need to have choice. And so what kind of choice can you have? You can flow with life, or you can choose not to flow with life. Okay? Then that on itself, because we are creative beings, we have this creative power. We are an extension, a fractal extension of the creative power of that energy we are speaking about. We are different expression, and we have this creative power. So with our creative power and the free will choice, we can go way down that path of creating anything that is further and further in separation from it, which cannot, like, in the end, it will always get back to source anyway. But during this momentary experience here, you can fully experience all the consequence of separation, like from all the aspects of this organic nature, imposing, resisting the flow of life. And so that will have its own fruits and streams of consequences and of creation. And after that, yeah, it come from outside. I hear some people sometimes telling me, no, this is the nature of man. And I'm not agreeing with that, because I believe that many of this is a way to bypass still our responsibility, So I can see that also in some people that will stay very fast, like, I know, no, this is the nature of man, and religion has been a big part of that with the original sin. But yeah, this is the way I see it, that, yeah, we have the choice actually, and the paradox, because everything, like when you're on that line of that self-development and doing the work for real, you realize the paradoxal nature. We've made a podcast on that, and it's like, yeah, you have free will choice to go against the natural flow of things, or just to walk right into the natural flow of things,
Yeah.
And so in the awakening and development, you start having a different notion and perception of what free will choice is, because actually, okay, I have two choices. I can do what I want and not caring for the consequences of it, and do it for my own sake and for my own little egoistic mind. Or I can do the hard work, but the more you decide I do the hard work and I want to flow with life and divinity, and then, yes, it's still a choice, but do I have any choice then to be led to where it's leading me, So some paradoxical nature about all this issue with the free will choice.
But I mean, we had a podcast episode actually with the three of us with Rachel on this, right? On the whole topic of, well, it started off with this whole thing that we hear in the spiritual matrix of you can't have light without darkness. And it's not that the creator creates all this stuff. It's that she creates and we are extensions of creator, which means we are creator beings, which means now we go off and create. And she gives that example of, you know, if the creator, let's say, created me and I go and I have 13 kids and the 13 kids are all messed up, that's not the creator's business. That's my responsibility because I created this, right? And so that's what we have to remember, that the source of all that didn't create patriarchy. It was these creations that went off, like you said, that had free will choice to create hell and evil and all of that stuff. And like you said, too, you know, there's so much bypassing. Everyone's bypassing because nobody actually wants to become even the first level of the way of responsibility, which is that I'm divinely responsible for all the things that I create. And so, I mean, that, right, Danny? Like, it's not that the creator created the patriarchy.
Yeah, it's something that I haven't fully understood, which is why I'm still asking questions about it. Because then you could say, well, if you are the creator and you created it, then didn't the creator create it?
No, because you have free will choice.
As the creator.
It all comes back to creator, but you're an extension of creator, which means you're responsible for what you create.
Exactly.
See, yeah, but that in itself, that's bypassing though, and it's also not taking any ownership.
I'm not saying not to take ownership. I'm trying to like really understand, like, how did this energy actually get created? If we are the creator, we all are, right? And then somehow this energy didn't just appear out of nowhere. It had to be created. The parasitic energy, the force, all that energy that's in there that we could call evil. Let's just summarize it and say evil. Like, how did it actually begin? Because it had to be created by something, or it can't, it can't just it doesn't just magically appear.
Yeah, I believe it's in the order of things. Like you can choose whatever you want. You can experience separation, but then you will experience also the consequences of separation, which will eventually lead you back into unity. Or if you insist going further and further down in separation, you will go further down in separation and experience more and more of the consequence of separation. All right? But by design, from a personal perspective, it's always trying to teach you and educate you to go back to divinity, to be more responsible and to really gain and connect to this higher perspective of who we are, actually. Now, that being said, even from a collective perspective, somebody going fully down that path, like, can become a teacher somehow of what I'm not willing to do, of some choices and some path that this is not what I want to do. But we are really, someday they make the analogy of the video game. So let's say this is a whole video game, and we've been able to create that dimension where we can embody this vessel with this little AI autopilot that's usually just an autopilot, and you can fully identify with that autopilot and completely lose track of the purpose of the game, of why and who created the game, And so yeah, in the end, you know, like, I think that a part of it is from design. It's like, yeah, you need to be able to experience separation. And as it is, you will get the veil of forgetfulness and the ego, and you will have to forget the full connection. It's like a game. So you can find your way back, you know, into that world and bring down actually divinity in all the aspect of that world. Because in the end, we're like bridges between, okay, this creative power and that dimension. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, you can co-create and create any world. Like this is a video game, and you can develop worlds and aspect of the game that, yeah, creatively, yeah, maybe, you know, some people, they like to watch horror movies, you know, for some reasons. So if you want to create a horror movie kind of dimension and live in it, yeah, this is what's happening, you know.
Yeah, as you were talking earlier, and I started to like reflect on this, I could hear that there's this voice inside of me that's still asking this question. But then as you continued to share it, like I was seeing it kind of play out on like a real macro perspective. And then it's like, yeah, why does it matter to ask that question? The only thing that really matters is actually becoming divinity. And the more that I sit there and I think this is what happens a lot with like real deep contemplation, is you can get really lost in. I was just watching something last night and it was like talking about contemplating who you are. I think that was great. I think it's an important thing to do because I'm constantly asking that question, who am I? But I feel like the answer is not from like asking that question. It's by just actually becoming divinity. And in the path of actually becoming it, then you're going to, somewhere along the line, you're going to answer that question. And I know that question for me, like, where did this begin? It's like, it doesn't really matter. The fact of the matter is it's here. The evil does exist and it is on the planet. And the more that I sit there in my mind and question, like, oh, why is this here? It's like, who cares? Like, it's here. Accept that, and don't consent to it. And I know that was the kind of the roundabout thing that Rachel brought up whenever I've asked her about this, is like, evil, she always says, evil exists because we allow it to. So it's like, I can sit here and question its origin all I want, but the fact of the matter is, doesn't matter where it came from, it's here. So what am I going to do about it? Am I going to choose to keep running the programs of separation and severing my connection to divinity? Or am I going to, you know, as you said, keep making that choice through our free will to get further lost, you know, down the path of severance?
Another way to put that is like, okay, if actually I have this creative power, I'm an extension of that creative power. This creative power cannot be stopped. It's all the time full on. My creative power cannot be stopped. It's always pouring out of me. But it can be consciously used. This comes back to the free will issue. Like, if I'm not aware of all those unconscious choices that I'm taking, okay, then I'm making so many choices, but do I really make those choices? I'm just reacting, compulsory, contracting, and reacting like a robot, actually. Every time the situation comes, now I have this reaction that pushes me into that choice again. Am I really taking a decision there? But my creative power is always completely involved, either completely unconsciously from my wounding, and this is what we see out there, actually, all the wounding, the creativity of all the wounding of the collective, creating something we would like to see disappear. We would like can't we do something more creative, guys? Like, how come, if we have that power, can we create like depth like monetary systems that put us in debt and in struggle all day long, wars, genocides. Is that like how creative we are? Or can we choose consciously to create something better? And so, yes, evil is there. We know how it's making its way through, but if you look at it, evil is making its way through trauma. So when you listen to Marx and all the satanic rituals and stuff like that, actually they take their own kids from early childhood, and those kids get raped, get like deep trauma. So those kids, once they grow up, so some few like Max got out of this, and for some reason got some grace and took back her own free will on what she was like trained to do. But like, when does that happen? And why does that happen? And why so many people are keeping stuck in there? This is a mystery. I have no say about that, but definitely it's using a lot of creative power to do some weird kind of choices.
Yeah, I heard this. Rachel says this similar thing all the time. I was listening to something the other day, and it was talking how we live in a realm, we live in a reality where magic is not real, yet it's being used to create the exact reality that we're in. The evil forces out there, they use magic against us to create a world where magic doesn't exist, so that we don't use this, the magic that's within us, to create in a way that would actually free ourselves.
Yeah. And they spread trauma, because the more trauma is spread, and then the more you get stuck into the reactive in their world, into reactionary, and using like your own creative potential from your wounding.
Yeah, and this also comes down to our level of consciousness. We can create something so harmonious and wonderful and better, but if our level of consciousness is not elevating, we're just going to keep creating where we're vibrating at. So like a beautiful example of this is, as you guys know, I'm very involved in the world of dog rescue, right? And I see so many people being in so much outrage about the fact that so many dogs are being euthanized and abandoned and tortured and abused. But they think that creating something better is about voicing all of their anger about it, and like trying to build a new system with new leaders. But the level of consciousness in everybody is still so low. And everything that these people who think that they're doing good by shouting about it, by speaking about it, by being so angry about what's going on, have no idea and are so blind to the fact that they energetically contribute to why animals are suffering in the beginning. And that's because our level of consciousness is so low. And this is the patriarchy, right? This is what, but you're blind and deaf to it. You don't know that in order for you to create something new, you have to become something new. That education is missing. Yeah, so we'll just keep creating from our level of consciousness until we start elevating our levels of consciousness.
And not only it's missing, is that when it appears, it's being destroyed.
Yes.
And
distorted.
Yeah, and it has existed. It exists. But it's a war. It's a war on that form of education. It's a war on that form of connection to the divine. So many cultures were living like way more, the whole idea that we are evolving and that we are the most evolved version of human history. I believe that this is so bullshit.
Yes.
There's there is no way, you know. There is no way. Look at even the what has been built, you know, in the past and what we are building now, things like that. I mean, many ways. So of course there is a evolutionary path, but so much of this culture is purposely dumping and lowering and trying to get everybody stuck in survival, that for me this is not evolving. And yes, a lot of us are evolving out of it and trying to awaken in that. But the whole version of history, it's also manipulated, and it's all bullshit the way this is served to us. I don't believe any of it.
Oh yeah, it's a bunch of crap. 100%. 100%. As you were sharing then, Greg, I understood now what, this might be a bit far out there, but what cancer is. I could see it all as you were explaining everything. How on like a macro level, I could see like parts of the universe going dark and like consuming and eating in this parasitic energy. And I don't know fully yet of why, that question of why it exists in the first place, but it was starting to consume itself. And as I'm watching like that play out, and you saying that, you know, it always comes back, I realized that the light, like divinity there in that moment, is going to create divine separation and kind of like create a boundary around the part of the universe that's eating itself. This energy that is now in this planet and ruling the patriarchy, the conquering energy, the parasitic energy. And the divine thing to do is actually create the boundary and say no. And that's the kind of like the war that's going on, is like the light is saying, no, we don't tolerate this energy right here. This isn't vibrating as divinity. And in that's the same thing that's happening in our bodies when we get cancer, when we have a program or all this wounding and this patriarchal energy within us somewhere, and it's creating a huge distortion and disease. The body's response is to create a tumor and put it into separation so that it doesn't leak out into the rest of the physical body. And that's the same thing that's happening on a macro scale with the universe, with this parasitic energy, where it's trying to consume, it's trying to take. And the divine thing to do is say no, is to actually have boundaries and to not allow that. And eventually it will consume itself, and, you know, dissolve back into, I'm sure, stardust and start back up in the reincarnation cycle. Eventually it will sizzle out. But in order to do that, the energy around the parasitic force has to actually find its divinity and its boundary and say no. And we see that in our physical body with a tumor. Like the tumor's created and it's containing the toxins. And then I know modern science will be like, oh, we'll just chop the tumor off, and then you're releasing all the toxins into the human body. Like the body is doing its best thing. And I'm not saying just leave tumors, right? I'm not an expert in all this, but I can see how all of this is playing out, all of this spiritual war, and it all stems from just being completely separate. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, and a lot of time those diseases are expression of the body trying to find solution for inner conflict.
Exactly.
And when you're speaking about the boundary and setting the boundary to say no, I want to express also that this is not just saying no. It's about what are you doing about this within yourself. What all energies you're leaving, you're letting yourself being, your creativity being used by, you know. So yes, it's saying no to that, and also like be really mindful, because it's not just at that level. Being really mindful, it's also teaching. It's also teaching of actually, oh, and the intensity of like this no, it's supposed to boost my willingness to really become and embody something differently, and out and being more aware of where I am still behaving like what I'm seeing there, which can be an expansion, or I always think about, you know, a binocular, like a magnifying of something that's alive within me, even it's lighter and more subtle, you know. But how this thing that I'm seeing out there that I would like to see, and I want to say no to it, how is it still being at play and living within myself? Because this is where I have all the power to transmute and transform it, you know. So even that can be like, in the design of life, is still fuel for, you know, becoming something else, and giving the willingness and the devotion into becoming something else, and to choosing the art and not the woundedness, you know.
I mean, yeah, and that's why, you know, this mastering energetic detachment class that Greg, Danny, and I just finished in our second year at school is all about consent. You know, you think that you're not constantly consenting to streams of consciousness flowing through you, but you are. And until you become very acutely aware of every single SOC that's coming in and taking over and using your vessel to live and to be, you're going to constantly consent. So that consent has to come from, okay, I got to start learning how to master energy. And what am I saying yes to when I don't even know that I'm saying yes to the stream of consciousness coming in and paying rent?
I
freely.
love I love the acronym that you use, that SOC, obviously meaning stream of consciousness, and it's so funny because it's like SOB, which I'm sure
It is a son of a bitch.
hilarious, brilliant.
Yeah.
And it's also what we're going to be learning about in this upcoming fall semester.
Yes.
We're going to be learning about in a class called Understanding Mind Control. That's going to be taught by Max Lowen and Rachel. This is a fall elective, and I cannot wait for this class. I'm so excited. So that is something that you do have to be, you know, enrolled as an enrolled student for a few semesters. So if you are interested in that class, you're going to have to come join and start understanding the foundations of this work first. So if you're interested in learning more about how to enroll and maybe partake in some of these classes, just go to mastersofselfuniversity.com and look under the student enrollment. We'll have some student enrollment dates available where you can join a free meeting and look towards enrolling in January. Gregoire, any final words before we jump off today?
Yeah, the final word is always that we have really to awaken to our responsibility, that we've been dumbed down to be locked at the surface of things, and the world is way more, that we have to learn to be aware of those deeper and subtler aspects of our reality, because a lot of things are happening unconsciously down there, and this is like really the root of all the evil that we are seeing in the world, you know. And we're all a part of it. Yep. And we have so much power and so much actually lever, like ways to regain and awaken to that and really change things. But it starts within, definitely.
Yeah. Beautiful, as always. Thank you so much for being here, Greg. And to everybody at home, thanks for listening. And we'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.